The pregnancy test had two bright pink lines. I stood there in my entryway, holding that small plastic stick in my trembling hand, feeling the world tilt sideways. Two lines, positive, unmistakable. My daughter-in-law Emily was pregnant. Except that was impossible. Medically, definitively, absolutely impossible. Because 6 years ago, my son David had gotten a vasectomy. I remember that day like it was yesterday. Him coming home from Dr. Haynes's office looking hollowed out, defeated, like someone had reached inside and scooped out his soul. I remember Emily's triumphant smile, that cold satisfaction in her eyes, as if she'd won some kind of war I hadn't even known they were fighting. So those two lines, they weren't just surprising, they were damning. I'd found the test 3 minutes earlier, slipped out of a torn delivery box by the front door, the kind of cheap packaging that tears open too easily, spilling its secrets onto my hardwood floor. At first, I almost stepped right over it, but something made me stop, made me bend down, my knees protesting because yes, I was old, and pick it up. And now here I stood, holding proof of a betrayal so enormous I could barely breathe. My daughter-in-law was carrying another man's child, and judging by that delivery box, she didn't even have the decency to hide her tracks properly. I felt something cold and deliberate settle into my bones. Not anger exactly, something sharper, more dangerous, because Emily had just made the fatal mistake of believing I was nothing more than a harmless old woman. A relic to be tolerated, an obstacle to be managed until I conveniently disappeared. She had no idea what was coming. No idea that I'd spent 35 years teaching teenagers to dissect lies, to find truth in subtext, to understand that the quietest characters are often the most lethal. I slipped that pregnancy test into my apron pocket and felt my lips curve into something that wasn't quite a smile. The game was on, and by the time I was done, she'd learned that underestimating a retired English teacher was the worst mistake a clever liar could make. But let me back up. Let me tell you how we got here. 3 days before I found that test, Emily said something that should have warned me. We were in the kitchen, my kitchen, the one I'd cooked 10,000 meals in, the one that still smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and 40 years of memories. This house smells old, Margaret. That's how she put it. Not good morning, not how did you sleep. Just that casual cruelty delivered over cooling coffee with her nose wrinkled like she'd stepped in something foul. I was standing at the sink, my hands in warm dishwater, and I felt something shift inside me even then. A warning, a premonition. Does it? I asked mildly, rinsing a plate. It does. She leaned against the counter in her expensive silk robe, examining her manicured nails with studied disinterest. David and I have been talking about freshening things up, maybe moving forward with some changes. Changes. That word had been floating around for months. Remodeling, updating, getting rid of the old furniture, the wallpaper, the photographs. Getting rid of me, essentially. Making room for her vision, her life, her plans. I see, I said softly. She smiled then, that practiced smile that never reached her cold eyes. I'm so glad you understand, Margaret. It's just time, you know. Time to make this house feel more like ours. Ours. As if the home Tom and I had scraped together, raised our son in, and filled with love was somehow hers to claim. I dried my hands on a dish towel, taking my time. Everything looked so peaceful that morning, so ordinary. The hum of the old refrigerator Emily called vintage with a sneer, the tick of the wall clock, the bird feeder outside where cardinals came to visit. Would you like some toast? I asked, keeping my voice gentle, accommodating. The voice she expected from me. No. She set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink. I have yoga class at 10. And just like that, she was gone. Floating back upstairs to get dressed, leaving me standing in my kitchen, feeling that dark premonition grow stronger. I didn't know what was coming yet, not exactly. But I knew, the way you know when a storm is building, that something was about to break. I was right. 3 days later, that torn delivery box, that pregnancy test, those two impossible pink lines. Now, standing in my entryway with proof of her betrayal in my pocket, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. This was it. The moment everything changed. The moment I stopped being the harmless old woman she could push around and dismiss. I went back to the kitchen, made myself a fresh cup of tea, sat down at the table where I'd helped David with his homework, where Tom and I had shared countless meals, where I'd weathered grief and loneliness, and now this ultimate betrayal. The morning light slanted through the window, catching dust motes in the air. Everything looked exactly the same, but everything had changed. Emily thought she could erase me, thought she could take my home, manipulate my son, and parade her lies right under my nose. Thought the smell of this old house, the scent of memory and patience and accumulated wisdom, was just weakness waiting to be swept away. She was wrong, because that smell she hated so much, that wasn't weakness. That was 40 years of love and loss and learning. That was the scent of a woman who'd survived widowhood, loneliness, and countless small humiliations. That was the accumulated weight of wisdom. And wisdom, as it turns out, makes for a very particular kind of weapon. I took a sip of my tea and began to plan. Not revenge exactly, something better, something she'd never see coming. They wanted changes. I'd give them changes. They wanted this house, this life. Well, we'd see about that. The game had begun, and I already knew how it would end. I didn't confront her right away. That would have been the amateur's move. No, I did something much smarter. I waited. I watched. I became the harmless old woman she already thought I was, only more so. Sweeter, softer, more oblivious. Because here's what Emily didn't understand about teaching high school English for 35 years. You learn to spot a liar from across a crowded classroom. You learn to read the microscopic shifts in body language, the tiny hesitations before a fabricated excuse, the overconfident delivery that always masks guilt. And I just caught the biggest lie of all. That evening, David came home around 6:30. I heard his car pull into the driveway, the familiar slam of the door, his heavy footsteps on the porch. My son. My gentle, defeated son who'd let his wife hollow him out piece by piece over 6 years of marriage. Emily was upstairs. I was in the kitchen where I'd been all afternoon thinking, planning. The pregnancy test was hidden in my bedroom, wrapped in tissue paper and tucked into my nightstand drawer. Evidence, proof, my insurance policy. Hey, Mom. David dropped his messenger bag by the door and loosened his tie. He looked tired. He always looked tired these days, like life was something to be endured rather than lived. Hello, sweetheart. I kept my voice light, normal, as I stirred the pot of soup on the stove. Chicken noodle, his favorite since he was 8 years old. How was work? Fine. That one-word answer that meant nothing and everything. He poured himself a glass of water, drank it standing by the sink. Where's Emily? Upstairs, I think. She mentioned not feeling well earlier. That got his attention. His head turned slightly, concern flickering across his tired features. Not feeling well? What's wrong? I shrugged, kept stirring. The scent of chicken and vegetables filled the kitchen, comforting and familiar. She didn't say exactly. Just looked a little pale. You know how she gets. He nodded vaguely and headed upstairs. I heard their muffled voices through the ceiling, heard Emily's higher pitch, probably playing up whatever symptoms she'd invented, heard David's deeper tones, probably offering sympathy he didn't realize was wasted on a performance. I ladled soup into bowls and waited. They came down 20 minutes later. Emily had changed into loungewear, soft gray sweatpants and an oversized sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She'd pulled her blonde hair into a messy bun and wiped off most of her makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, carefully, deliberately fragile. Margaret, she said softly, sliding into a chair at the kitchen table with practiced delicacy. I'm sorry I've been so tired lately. I think I might be coming down with something. I set bowls of soup in front of them both, added a plate of buttered bread. No need to apologize, dear. We all have our off days. David reached across the table and squeezed her hand. The gesture made my chest ache. He loved her, genuinely, completely loved her, and she was using that love like a weapon. "Maybe you should see a doctor," he suggested gently, his voice full of concern. "If you're not feeling better by tomorrow?" Emily glanced at me, then back at him. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculation. Timing. "Maybe," she murmured, sounding uncertain in a way that was absolutely certain. "I've been feeling, different. For a few days now." The air in the kitchen shifted. I felt it like a drop in barometric pressure before a storm. David frowned. "Different how?" She took a sip of soup, set down her spoon with a soft clink, looked at him with wide eyes that somehow managed to shimmer with manufactured emotion. "I don't want to say anything yet. Not until I'm sure, but..." The pause hung there, deliberate and loaded. "But what?" David's voice had changed, gotten higher, more anxious. Emily reached for his hand again, held it between both of hers. I can't be certain, but I think I might be pregnant." The words dropped into the kitchen like stones into still water. David went completely white. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not possible." You know that's not possible." "I know what the doctor said." Her voice trembled beautifully, perfectly. "But David, stranger things have happened. Medical miracles. Remember that story we read about the couple in Michigan? The husband had a vasectomy and 10 years later..." "Emily." David's voice cracked. "I had the procedure. Dr. Haynes did it himself. It's permanent. I'm late." She said it quietly, firmly, with just the right amount of fear and hope mixed together. 2 weeks late, and I've been nauseous and exhausted, and my breasts are tender." She touched her chest lightly, demonstratively. "David, I know it seems impossible, but what if it's not?" I stood at the stove, pretending to focus on wiping down the counter. My hands were steady. My face was neutral. Inside, I was screaming, because she was good. God help me, she was very good. David looked at her, then at me, then back at her. His face cycled through disbelief, confusion, hope, fear. If you really think we should get a test, a proper test, I will." Emily's voice was soft, tremulous, perfectly pitched. "I'll go to the pharmacy tomorrow." "But David, if this is real..." She let the sentence trail off, pregnant with possibility. Literally. He pulled her into his arms then, right there at the kitchen table, held her like she was something precious, something miraculous. I watched my son's face transform with cautious, terrified hope, and felt my resolve harden into something cold and unbreakable. Because I knew the truth. I'd seen the test. I knew this miracle was a lie wrapped in betrayal, tied up with another man's child. And I knew exactly whose child it was, though I hadn't said it out loud yet, not even to myself. But the pieces were there, waiting to be assembled. Dr. Lucas Haynes, the respected urologist who'd performed David's vasectomy 6 years ago, the same doctor Emily had mentioned casually a few times over the past months, coffee meetings to discuss fundraising for the hospital, charity galas. David was always too tired to attend. The same doctor whose name I'd heard whispered through the bathroom door 2 days ago when I'd walked past and Emily hadn't known I was there. "Lucas," she'd breathed into her phone, her voice low and intimate. "We need to be more careful." I turned away from them, rinsed my dish in the sink. The water ran warm over my hands. Outside the window, evening was settling over the neighborhood, turning everything soft and shadowed. "This is wonderful news," I said quietly, keeping my back to them, letting my voice carry just the right amount of grandmotherly joy. "If it's true, it's a miracle indeed." Emily looked at me over David's shoulder. Our eyes met for just a second, and in that second I saw it, the flash of triumph, the glint of victory. She thought she'd won, thought she'd played us both perfectly. She had no idea I was 10 steps ahead. That night, after they'd gone upstairs, after the house settled into silence, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and made my decision. I would give her exactly what she wanted. I would be the doting grandmother to be, the supportive mother-in-law, the harmless old woman thrilled by this impossible miracle. And while I played that role, I would systematically, carefully, patiently dismantle every lie she'd ever told. The pregnancy test in my nightstand was just the beginning. Now I needed more. Evidence, proof. A trail she didn't know she was leaving. I pulled out my phone, the smartphone David had insisted I learn to use 2 years ago, and opened the voice memo app. Tomorrow I'd start recording, listening, watching. Emily wanted to play games? Fine, but she was playing against someone who'd been teaching critical thinking and textual analysis since before she was born. And this particular text? I was going to deconstruct it line by line until the truth stood naked and undeniable. I smiled into my tea, feeling something that might have been satisfaction or might have been rage. Hard to tell the difference anymore. The miracle was about to become a reckoning. The next morning, I became someone else entirely. Not Margaret Hamilton, retired English teacher with a spine of steel and a mind sharp enough to cut glass. No, I became the woman Emily wanted me to be. Docile, grateful, harmlessly enthusiastic about her fraudulent miracle. It was, if I'm being honest, the performance of my lifetime. I started at breakfast. Emily came down late, around 9, looking deliberately exhausted in a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car. She touched her stomach lightly as she entered the kitchen, a gesture so calculated it made my teeth ache. "Good morning, dear." I smiled warmly, genuinely, like I just won the lottery. I made ginger tea. It's supposed to help with morning sickness. Her eyes widened slightly. Surprise flickered across her perfect features. You made ginger tea?" "Of course." I poured her a cup, added just the right amount of honey. The steam rose between us, fragrant and innocent. "If you're really pregnant, we need to take care of you." "Take care of the baby." I watched her process this, watched her recalibrate. She'd expected resistance, maybe, skepticism, questions about the impossibility of it all. Instead, she got enthusiastic compliance. She sipped the tea carefully, eyeing me over the rim of the cup. "Thank you, Margaret. That's very thoughtful." "It's nothing." I waved my hand dismissively, turned back to the stove where I was scrambling eggs. "I'm just so excited, a grandchild, after all these years of hoping." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but I delivered it with the sweetness of honey. Emily relaxed visibly, settled into her chair with a small, satisfied smile. "I'm taking a test today." "A proper one, just to be absolutely sure." "Wonderful." I plated the eggs, added toast, set everything in front of her with the care of a devoted servant. "Let me know if you need anything." Anything at all. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment she decided I was harmless. Foolish, completely, utterly convinced. Perfect. Over the next few days, I ramped up the performance, bought her expensive prenatal vitamins from the organic grocery store across town, made bland, nausea-friendly meals, plain rice, steamed vegetables, carefully seasoned chicken, offered to drive her to appointments, suggested she rest more, work less, take it easy. I became the doting mother-in-law from central casting, and while I played that role, I started recording everything. The voice memo app on my phone became my constant companion. I kept it in my apron pocket, ready to activate with a single touch. Every conversation, every phone call Emily made when she thought I wasn't listening, every careless comment dropped like breadcrumbs leading to the truth. The first real evidence came 3 days after her announcement. I was in the garden, supposedly weeding the flower beds by the kitchen window. Really, I was positioned where I could hear through the screen. Emily was inside, on her phone, her voice low but not quite low enough. "Lucas, I told you it's fine." She completely believes it. A pause, then a laugh, bright and cruel. The old woman is beside herself with joy. Already buying baby clothes, can you imagine? My hands stilled in the dirt. The recorder in my pocket captured every word. No, David suspects nothing. He's too desperate to believe it's real. Another pause. Yes, the money, that's the next step. I need to convince her to give us the down payment for the new house. Tell her it's for the baby's future. The new house, of course. This wasn't just about the affair, about the child she was carrying. This was about money, about taking everything Tom and I had built and claiming it as hers. I pulled a weed slowly, methodically. Let the soil crumble between my fingers. Breathe through the rage that threatened to choke me. I know. Be patient. Emily's voice dropped even lower. Once we have the money and the house, we can figure out the rest. Your clinic will be funded. I'll have what I need, and Margaret will be exactly where she belongs. Pushed aside. I stood up slowly, brushed the dirt from my knees, walked into the house through the back door with a smile plastered on my face. Emily was still on the phone when I entered the kitchen. She startled, spun around, her eyes wide with momentary panic. Then she recovered, smooth as silk. I have to go, she said sweetly into the phone. Talk later. She hung up and beamed at me. Margaret, I didn't hear you come in. Just finished in the garden. I held up my dirt-stained hands as proof. The roses are looking beautiful this year. I was thinking, for the baby's room, we could paint it a soft yellow, gender neutral. What do you think? The panic in her eyes melted into something like contempt, disguised as gratitude. That sounds lovely. You're so thoughtful. It's my pleasure, dear. I washed my hands at the sink, taking my time. Actually, I've been thinking about something else too. She tensed slightly. Oh? Well, I dried my hands, turned to face her with grandmother's warmth radiating from every pore. A baby changes everything, doesn't it? You and David will need more space, more security. I know this house is old, and I know you've never really felt comfortable here. Emily's breath caught, her eyes sharpened with interest. Margaret, we would never ask you to… No, hear me out. I sat down at the table, gestured for her to join me. She did, slowly, like someone approaching a possibly dangerous animal. I've been thinking about selling. Downsizing to something smaller, an apartment maybe, or one of those senior living communities. Her face struggled to contain the triumph. Are you sure? I'm old, Emily. And you're right, this house does smell old, smells like the past. I let my voice waver slightly, just enough to sound uncertain but resigned. Maybe it's time to let it go. Let you and David build something new. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her touch was cool, calculated. That's incredibly generous, Margaret. But we wouldn't want you to feel pressured. Not pressured. I squeezed her hand, looked into her lying eyes with nothing but benevolence. Excited for a fresh start, for all of us. Well, she sat back, tried to look hesitant while her mind clearly raced ahead. If you're really considering it, we should talk numbers. Market value, what makes sense for everyone. Of course, I nodded agreeably. But first, let me give you something. A gift for the baby. I stood up, went to my bedroom. From the nightstand drawer, the same drawer where the pregnancy test still lay hidden, I pulled out an envelope. Inside was a check I'd written that morning. $50,000, nearly half my savings. When I came back to the kitchen, Emily was texting someone. Probably Lucas, probably already celebrating her victory. I set the envelope on the table between us. What's this? She asked, though her eyes had already calculated the weight, the significance. A gift. I pushed it toward her gently, kindly. For you and David. For the baby's future. Use it however you need. Down payment on a house, nursery furniture, medical bills, whatever helps. Emily opened the envelope, saw the check. Her hands actually trembled. Margaret, this is too much. Nonsense. I patted her shoulder like a grandmother should. What good is money if I can't spend it on my family? On my grandchild? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Real tears, which was impressive. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with manufactured emotion. "This means everything." I smiled down at her, this woman who was about to take $50,000 of my money and use it to fund her escape with her lover and her illegitimate child. "You're welcome, dear," I said softly. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that the check was bait. Marked bait. And the moment she deposited it, the moment she spent a single dollar of it, she'd be creating a paper trail that would lead straight back to her lies. That evening, after she'd gone upstairs, probably to call Lucas and celebrate, I sat in the kitchen with my tea and my phone. Listened to the recording I'd captured. Her voice, cold and calculating. The old woman is beside herself with joy. I smiled into the darkness. "Oh, Emily, you have no idea what joy really looks like, but you will." The name Lucas had been haunting me for days. I'd heard it whispered through bathroom doors, murmured into phones when Emily thought no one was listening. Lucas, always Lucas, said with an intimacy that made my skin crawl. But I needed to be sure, needed to connect the dots between suspicion and proof. Because accusing someone of an affair with your son's doctor, the very doctor who'd sterilized him, required more than recordings and intuition. It required certainty. So I did what any determined woman would do. I went to see him. Toledo General Hospital sat on the east side of town, a sprawling complex of brick and glass that always smelled like antiseptic and fear. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, when Tom was sick, when David broke his arm at 12 for my own checkups and scans. But I'd never been there hunting truth. It was a Thursday morning, crisp and clear. I drove my old Honda through streets I'd known for 40 years, past the library where I used to take David for story time, past the diner where Tom and I had coffee every Sunday morning. The parking garage echoed with my footsteps. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. The urology department was on the 3rd floor. I took the elevator, watching the numbers climb, feeling my resolve harden with each ascending floor. The reception area was typical. Bland art on beige walls, uncomfortable chairs, magazines no one read. A young woman sat behind the desk, her smile professional and tired. "Can I help you?" she asked brightly, fingers poised over her keyboard. "Yes, dear. I'm here to see Dr. Haynes." I smiled warmly, leaning slightly on my purse like I needed the support. Playing old, playing harmless. "I don't have an appointment, but I was hoping he might spare a few minutes. It's about my son." She glanced at her computer screen, then back at me with practiced sympathy. "Dr. Haynes is with a patient right now, but if you'd like to wait, I can let him know you're here. What's your name?" "Margaret Hamilton." I settled into one of those uncomfortable chairs, smoothed my skirt. "I'll wait." "Thank you." 20 minutes passed, then 30. I sat there with a magazine open on my lap, not reading a single word. Around me, the medical world churned on. Nurses walking briskly past, patients checking in, phones ringing with muffled urgency. Finally, a door opened. A man emerged in a white coat, tall and distinguished with silver threading through his dark hair. Expensive watch, confident stride, the kind of man who was used to being respected, admired, trusted. Dr. Lucas Haynes. Our eyes met across the waiting room. I watched recognition flicker. He knew my name, must have been told I was here. Followed by something else. Confusion, maybe, or concern. He approached with his professional smile firmly in place, hand extended. "Mrs. Hamilton, Rebecca said you wanted to see me." I stood slowly, took his hand. His grip was firm, smooth. The hand of a surgeon, the hand that had touched my daughter-in-law in ways I didn't want to imagine. "Yes, doctor. Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." I kept my voice gentle, grateful. "I know you're terribly busy." "Not at all." He gestured toward his office. "Please, come in." His office was exactly what you'd expect. Diplomas on the wall, medical journals on shelves, a photo of him shaking hands with someone important at some charity event. Everything carefully curated to project competence and success. I sat in the chair across from his massive desk, He settled into his leather chair with easy authority. "How can I help you, Mrs. Hamilton?" His smile was warm, practiced, but his eyes were watchful. "Well?" I folded my hands in my lap, looked at him with grandmother's earnestness. "It's about my son, David, and my daughter-in-law, Emily." Something flickered across his face. Brief, nearly imperceptible, but I'd spent decades reading students' faces when they claimed the dog ate their homework. I knew guilt when I saw it. David Hamilton. He nodded slowly, fingers steepled in front of him. "Yes, I remember. The vasectomy procedure about 6 years ago." "Exactly." I leaned forward slightly, infused my voice with wonder and gratitude. "Doctor, the most amazing thing has happened. Emily is pregnant." The color drained from his face. Actually drained. I watched it happen in real time, the professional mask slipping, revealing naked shock underneath. "I'm sorry, what?" His voice came out tight, controlled, but his eyes betrayed him. "Pregnant." I smiled radiantly like I was announcing the second coming. "I know it seems impossible, but she's showing all the symptoms. Took multiple tests. They're all positive." Dr. Haynes sat back in his chair. His jaw worked silently. His fingers tapped once, twice against the armrest. That's highly unusual. That's what we thought too." I kept my tone light, conversational. "But I read somewhere that these procedures can sometimes reverse themselves. Spontaneous recanalization, I think it's called." "Mrs. Hamilton." He cleared his throat, regained some composure. "Spontaneous recanalization is extraordinarily rare. The chances are less than 1%, and usually only in the first year after the procedure." "But it can happen." I pressed gently, innocently. "It's possible." "Technically, yes, but—" He stopped himself, seemed to be calculating something. "Has David had a semen analysis?" That would be the definitive way to confirm whether the vasectomy is still effective. "Not yet." I shook my head. He's been so overwhelmed by the news. So hopeful. I think he's afraid to find out it might not be real. Dr. Haynes stood abruptly, walked to his window, looked out over the parking lot with his back to me. His shoulders were rigid with tension. "Mrs. Hamilton, I appreciate you coming to me with this, but I'm not sure what you're asking." "I'm not asking anything, doctor." I stood too, moved closer, close enough to see his reflection in the window glass. "I'm just sharing wonderful news. Emily wanted me to tell you personally. She said you'd be so pleased. Said you two had become quite close over the past year." His reflection went very still. "Close?" The word came out carefully, too carefully. "Oh, yes." I smiled sweetly at his reflection. "She mentions you all the time. Coffee meetings, charity events, hospital fundraisers. She's always saying how kind you've been, how supportive." He turned to face me then. Our eyes locked, and in that moment we both knew. The game was up. The truth hung between us like smoke. "I see." His voice was flat now, stripped of its professional warmth. "Do you—" I tilted my head, let just a hint of steel enter my grandmother's voice. "Because I see quite clearly, Dr. Haynes. I see a man who performed a vasectomy on my son and then developed a rather intimate relationship with my son's wife. I see a pregnancy that's medically impossible. And I see lies, doctor. So many lies." His face went from pale to gray. "Mrs. Hamilton, I don't know what you think." "I don't think anything." I picked up my purse, held his gaze without flinching. "I know. The only question is what I'm going to do with that knowledge." "If you're threatening me—" He stepped forward, all traces of the kindly physician gone. "I'm not threatening anyone." I moved toward the door, paused with my hand on the handle. "I'm simply an old woman who loves her son. Who wants the truth, and who will do whatever it takes to protect her family." I opened the door, then looked back at him one last time. "Oh, and doctor, you might want to tell Emily to be more careful about where she has her private conversations. Sound carries in old houses. I left him standing there, frozen in his expensive office with his expensive lies crumbling around him. My hands didn't start shaking until I reached the parking garage. Then they trembled so badly I had to sit in my car for 5 full minutes before I could drive. But I'd done it. Confirmed what I'd suspected. Seen the guilt written across his face like a confession. Dr. Lucas Haynes was the father of Emily's child, and now he knew that I knew. The question was, what would he do about it? I drove home slowly, my mind already working through the next steps. The evidence I had, the evidence I still needed, the trap I was building piece by careful piece. When I pulled into my driveway, Emily's car was gone. Good. I needed time to think, to plan. I went inside, made tea, sat at my kitchen table. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, warm and golden. Everything looked so peaceful, so normal. My phone buzzed, a text from David. "Mom, Emily wants to have dinner Friday night. Something special. Her parents are coming too. Can you make your pot roast?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Emily's parents, the elegant, old-money Scots from Cleveland who'd raised a daughter who thought lies were just another form of currency. Then it hit me, the final piece sliding into place. This was it, the moment I'd been waiting for, the stage where truth would finally be revealed. I texted back, "Of course, sweetheart. I'd be delighted." Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years. James Morrison, private investigator, an old student of mine who'd gone into law enforcement and then private practice. I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Hamilton." His voice was surprised, pleased. "It's been ages. How are you?" "I'm well, James. And I need a favor." I kept my voice steady, clear. "I need surveillance, recordings, evidence. Can you help me?" A pause, then cautiously, "What kind of evidence?" I looked around my kitchen, this space where I'd raised my son, buried my husband, and now prepared to wage war. "The kind that destroys liars," I said quietly. James Morrison arrived at my house 2 days later on a gray Saturday morning that smelled like rain. He'd changed since I'd last seen him, filled out, gone silver at the temples, developed the kind of quiet competence that comes from years of watching people lie, but his eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, the eyes of the boy who'd sat in the front row of my junior English class and dissected Hamlet like a crime scene. "Mrs. Hamilton." He shook my hand firmly, genuine warmth in his voice. "You look well. You're kind to say so." I ushered him into the kitchen, poured coffee. Though I suspect I look exactly like what I am, an old woman with a problem. He sat at my table, pulled out a notepad. "All business now. Tell me everything." So I did. The pregnancy test, the impossible miracle, the recordings, my visit to Dr. Haynes and the fear I'd seen in his eyes, the $50,000 check that Emily had already deposited. I checked my bank account that morning, watched my savings drain away into her lies. James listened without interrupting, taking notes in a shorthand I couldn't read. When I finished, he sat back and let out a low whistle. "That's quite a web you've untangled." He tapped his pen against the notepad thoughtfully. "What do you need from me?" "Proof." I wrapped my hands around my coffee cup, felt the warmth seep into my bones. "Solid, undeniable proof, phone records, surveillance, anything that connects Emily and Dr. Haynes beyond reasonable doubt." "I can do that." He nodded slowly. "But Mrs. Hamilton, I have to ask. What's your end game here? Just knowing the truth or something more?" I met his eyes steadily. "Justice. I want my son to see what his wife really is. I want her lies exposed, and I want her out of my house." "Fair enough." He stood, tucked his notepad away. "I'll start immediately. Give me a week." I might not have a week. I walked him to the door. "There's a dinner party Friday night. Her parents are coming. I think Emily's planning something. Another manipulation, another move in whatever game she's playing." James paused on the threshold, looked back at me with something like concern. "Be careful, Mrs. Hamilton. Cornered animals bite. So do old teachers. I said quietly. He smiled at that, left with a promise to call as soon as he had something concrete. I spent the rest of that day preparing, not just for Friday's dinner, but for war. First, I went shopping, bought a new recorder, smaller, better quality, the kind that could be hidden in a flower arrangement or tucked into a decorative bowl. Bought fresh flowers for the dining room, bought ingredients for pot roast, David's favorite, the meal that would serve as backdrop to the unraveling. Then I called Emily's mother. Helen Scott answered on the third ring, her voice cultured and cool. "Margaret, how lovely to hear from you. We'd never been close." Helen had made it clear from the beginning that her daughter had married beneath her station. A middle-class IT specialist living in suburban Toledo was hardly the match she'd envisioned for her precious Emily. "Hello, Helen." I kept my voice warm, friendly. "I'm so looking forward to Friday. It's been too long since we've all gathered together." "Yes, well, Emily mentioned you were making dinner." A pause, weighted with judgment. "How thoughtful of you." "It's my pleasure. Actually, I was hoping you might extend an invitation for me." I took a breath, steadied myself. "Would Dr. Lucas Haynes be able to join us?" "Emily speaks so highly of him, and I'd love to thank him properly for his care of our family." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "Dr. Haynes?" Helen's voice had changed, sharpened. "Why on earth would you invite David's urologist to a family dinner?" "Oh, he's become more than that." I injected just the right amount of innocent enthusiasm. "Emily says they've become quite friendly through the hospital fundraising. And given her pregnancy, this miracle pregnancy, I thought it would be nice to include him in the celebration." Another pause, then carefully, "I see. Well, I can certainly ask if he's available." "Wonderful." I smiled into the phone, knowing she could probably hear it. "Friday at 7, I'll set an extra place." After I hung up, I sat very still, let the implications wash over me. Helen Scott knew. I was certain of it. That hesitation, that carefully measured response, she knew about her daughter's affair. Maybe not the pregnancy, but the relationship itself. And she'd chosen to look the other way, to protect appearances over morality. The anger that surged through me was cold and clarifying. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. James called Wednesday with preliminary findings, phone records showing hundreds of calls between Emily and Dr. Haynes over the past 18 months, text messages he was still working to retrieve, photos of them having coffee, lunch, drinks at upscale restaurants in Cleveland where they thought no one from Toledo would see them. "There's more," James said, his voice grim over the phone. "I did some digging into Dr. Haynes' finances. He's been trying to open a private practice, high-end urology clinic, but he's been struggling to secure funding." "Let me guess." My grip tightened on the phone. "He needs investors." "Exactly. And his business plan projects he'll need about $500,000 to get started." $500,000, the approximate value of my house if we sold it at market rate. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated scheme. Emily seduces the doctor, fakes a pregnancy, manipulates her family into giving her money and property, and uses it all to fund her lover's medical practice. They'd probably planned to run off together once they had everything they needed, leave David devastated and me homeless, and start their new life with my money. "James," I said quietly, "I need everything you have by Thursday night. Can you do that?" "I'll make it happen." He paused. "Mrs. Hamilton, are you sure about this?" "Once you pull this trigger, there's no going back." I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Friday arrived cold and clear. I spent the day cooking. The pot roast Tom had loved, roasted vegetables, homemade rolls that filled the house with the scent of yeast and butter, the smell of home, the smell Emily wanted to erase. David came home early from work to help set the table. He was nervous, I could tell, kept adjusting the silverware, straightening the napkins. "Mom, are you okay?" He touched my shoulder gently. "You've been quiet all week." "I'm fine, sweetheart." I patted his hand. "Just thinking about how much things are going to change." He smiled, misunderstanding. I know, a baby. It still doesn't feel real. My heart broke a little. For his innocence, for the pain that was coming. David, I said carefully, do you trust me? He looked surprised. Of course I do. Good. I turned back to the stove. Remember that tonight. No matter what happens, remember that I love you, and that everything I do is to protect you. Before he could ask what I meant, the doorbell rang. The Scotts had arrived. Andrew in his expensive suit, Helen in pearls that probably cost more than my car. They swept in bringing the scent of old money and older secrets, kissing the air near my cheeks with practiced insincerity. Emily appeared from upstairs, glowing in a soft blue dress that artfully suggested a baby bump that didn't exist yet. She kissed her parents, then turned to me with that perfect smile. Margaret, everything smells wonderful. Thank you, dear. I wiped my hands on my apron. We're just waiting for one more guest. Emily's smile froze. One more? Yes. I looked at her directly, let her see something in my eyes that made her breath catch. Didn't your mother tell you? I invited Dr. Haynes. He should be here any moment. The color drained from her face. Across the room, Helen's expression went carefully blank, and then, as if on cue, the doorbell rang again. I walked to the door slowly, savoring the moment, savoring the panic I could feel radiating from Emily like heat. When I opened it, Dr. Lucas Haynes stood on my porch. He looked pale, uncertain, trapped. Dr. Haynes. I smiled warmly. Come in, we've been expecting you. Behind me, I heard Emily's sharp intake of breath. The trap was set, the players assembled. Let the reckoning begin. The dining room had never felt so small. 7 people crowded around my table, the table where I'd served thousands of meals, celebrated birthdays, weathered grief. Now it was a stage, a courtroom, the setting for truth I'd been orchestrating for weeks. Dr. Haynes sat stiffly between Andrew Scott and David, looking like a man at his own execution. Emily was across from him, her face a careful mask of pleasant confusion. But I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. Helen Scott watched everything with the cool assessment of someone used to managing scandals. Her husband Andrew seemed oblivious, already working on his second glass of wine. And David, my sweet, trusting son. He kept glancing between Emily and Dr. Haynes with growing confusion, sensing something wrong but unable to name it. Thank you all for coming. I carried the pot roast to the table, set it down with practiced care. The rich scent of beef and herbs filled the room. It's so wonderful to have family together. And friends. I let that last word hang in the air. Watch Dr. Haynes flinch. Margaret, this looks delicious. Helen's voice was smooth, controlled. You've outdone yourself. It's nothing special. I began serving, moving around the table with grandmother's warmth. Just simple food for people I care about. Dr. Haynes, I'm so glad you could join us. He cleared his throat roughly. Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Hamilton. Though I'm still not entirely sure why. Nonsense. I placed a generous portion on his plate. You've been so important to this family. Performed David's procedure 6 years ago. And now, with Emily's miraculous pregnancy, it seemed only right to include you in the celebration. The word miraculous landed like a stone in still water. Emily's fork clattered against her plate. David's head snapped up. Dr. Haynes went absolutely white. Yes. I continued serving, my voice light and pleasant. We're all so amazed by this blessing, aren't we, Doctor? Given the permanent nature of vasectomies? Well, Dr. Haynes stammered, looking desperately at Emily. Medical anomalies do occur. Indeed they do. I settled into my chair, folded my hands. Though I've been doing some research. The spontaneous reversal rate is less than 1%, and almost always within the first year after the procedure, not 6 years later. The room went very quiet. The only sound was the tick of the wall clock and Andrew Scott's oblivious chewing. David set down his fork slowly. Mom, what are you saying? I'm saying miracles are rare, sweetheart. I looked at him with all the love in my heart. I'm saying we should be absolutely certain before we celebrate. That's all. Emily's voice came out high and strained. Margaret, I don't appreciate what you're implying. I took multiple tests. I'm late. I have symptoms. Oh, I'm not implying anything, dear. I smiled at her gently. I'm simply stating facts, medical facts. Isn't that right, Dr. Haynes? All eyes turned to him. He looked like he might be sick right there at my dinner table. The medical reality is that while rare, spontaneous recanalization can... He stopped, swallowed hard. Mr. Hamilton should have a semen analysis to confirm. Yes, he should. I nodded agreeably. But before we go to all that trouble, I thought we might clear up some other questions first. I stood and walked to the sideboard where I'd hidden my phone in the flower arrangement. The new recorder had been running since everyone arrived, but I needed the old recordings, the damning ones. You see, I've been noticing some things over the past few weeks. I picked up my phone, held it almost casually. Little inconsistencies, strange phone calls, whispered conversations. Emily's chair scraped back. What are you doing? Sharing the truth. I pressed play. Emily's voice filled my dining room, tinny but clear through the phone's speaker. Lucas, I told you it's fine. She completely believes it. The old woman is beside herself with joy. Already buying baby clothes, can you imagine? The effect was instantaneous. David's face drained of all color. Dr. Haynes stood abruptly, his chair nearly toppling. Helen's mask finally cracked, shock registering in her elegant features. But I wasn't finished. I played the second recording. Emily, again, her voice dripping with contempt. Once we have the money and the house, we can figure out the rest. Your clinic will be funded, I'll have what I need, and Margaret will be exactly where she belongs, pushed aside. Stop it! Emily shrieked, lunging for my phone. That's fake. She doctored those recordings. Did I? I stepped back, kept the phone out of her reach. Did I also doctor the phone records showing 463 calls between you and Dr. Haynes over the past 18 months? Did I fabricate the text messages, the photographs of you two having intimate dinners in Cleveland? David stood slowly, swaying slightly like he'd been struck. Emily, tell me this isn't real. She spun toward him, tears streaming now. Real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. David, please. She's lying. She's a bitter old woman who... I have one more recording. My voice cut through her pleading like a blade. Would you like to hear it, Emily? The one from 2 nights ago when you thought everyone was asleep. Her face went from red to gray. Margaret, please. This was Dr. Haynes, his professional composure shattered. Let's discuss this rationally. Rationally? I laughed, and it sounded harsh even to my own ears. You want rationality from the woman you conspired to rob? The mother whose son you betrayed? I pressed play on the third recording. This one was the worst. Emily's voice breathy and intimate in the darkness. I can't wait until this is over. Until we can be together properly. Los Angeles will be perfect. Your new clinic, our new life, and David will never even know whose baby this really is. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Andrew Scott had stopped eating. David looked at his wife like he'd never seen her before. Whose baby? His voice cracked on the words. Whose baby? Emily. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came. He turned to Dr. Haynes. You, it's you. Dr. Haynes held up his hands defensively, desperately. David, I can explain. Explain what? David's voice rose, shaking with rage I'd never heard from him. Explain how you performed a vasectomy on me and then slept with my wife? Explain how you plan to steal my mother's house to fund your practice? Explain any of this. This is ridiculous. Helen Scott stood abruptly, her composure returning with cold efficiency. These recordings prove nothing. Voices can be manipulated. For all we know, Margaret created this entire fiction. I have more than recordings. I walked to the sideboard again, pulled out the manila envelope James had delivered that morning. I have bank statements showing Emily deposited my $50,000 gift the same day I gave it to her. I have her text to Dr. Haynes, got the money. Step 1 complete. I have photographs, phone records, a paper trail that links them both to fraud, conspiracy, and theft. I spread the documents across my table, right over the pot roast that no one was eating. The evidence fanned out like a royal flush. And I have something else. I pulled out the last piece, the pregnancy test I'd found weeks ago. I have this, the test that started it all, the one Emily thought was still hidden. Emily's legs gave out. She collapsed back into her chair, her perfect face crumbling. She's not even pregnant, is she? David's voice was dead, hollow. Or if she is, He couldn't finish, couldn't say it. Dr. Haynes made a sound like a wounded animal. David, I'm sorry, I never meant. Never meant what? David turned on him with sudden fury. Never meant to destroy my marriage, my family, my life. The pregnancy is real. Emily's voice was small, defeated. But David, you have to understand. I don't have to understand anything. He looked at her with something beyond anger, beyond hurt, with the cold clarity of someone seeing truth for the first time. Except that you're a liar, and He gestured at Dr. Haynes with disgust. He's worse than a liar. He's a predator. Andrew Scott finally spoke, his face red with wine and confusion. Helen, did you know about this? Helen's jaw tightened. Of course not. Yes, you did. I looked at her directly. You knew about the affair. That's why you hesitated when I invited Dr. Haynes. You've been protecting her, covering for her. That's absurd. Is it? I pulled out one final document, an email James had retrieved from Helen's account through methods I probably didn't want to know about. You wrote to Emily 3 months ago, be more discreet, you're playing with fire, you knew, and you said nothing. The room erupted then. David shouting at Emily, Emily sobbing, Dr. Haynes trying to leave, Andrew yelling at Helen, Helen defending herself with cold precision. And me? I stood at the head of my table and watched it all unfold. Watched the lies burn away like paper in flame. Watched justice arrive in my dining room with the scent of pot roast and betrayal. Through the chaos, I heard a sound, faint but growing louder. Sirens, everyone froze. What did you do? Emily's eyes went wide with horror. Margaret, what did you do? I walked to the door slowly, calmly, opened it to reveal 2 police officers standing on my porch. Behind them, James Morrison waited in his car, having made the call I'd asked him to make. Officers, I stepped aside. Thank you for coming. I'd like to report fraud, conspiracy, and attempted theft. I have evidence. And just like that, the game was over. The officers stepped into my dining room like they were entering a crime scene, which I suppose they were. Officer Chen was younger, maybe 30, with kind eyes that took in the chaos with professional calm. Officer Rodriguez was older, gray-haired, with the weary expression of someone who'd seen every kind of human ugliness. They both nodded to me respectfully before turning their attention to the room. Mrs. Hamilton? Officer Chen's voice was steady, reassuring. You called about fraud? I did. I gestured to the table where my evidence lay scattered among untouched plates of cold pot roast. Everything's documented. Bank records, recordings, text messages. A conspiracy to defraud me of my home and savings. Emily was on her feet now, her face blotchy with tears and rage. This is insane. She's making this up. She's a vindictive old woman who... Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Officer Rodriguez held up one hand. His voice carried the weight of authority. We'll take everyone's statement. But first we need to see this evidence. I handed him the manila envelope, watched him pull out the documents one by one, the bank statements, the phone records, the photographs James had taken of Emily and Dr. Haynes having lunch at that restaurant in Cleveland, their hands intertwined across the table. Officer Chen was recording Emily's meltdown on his body camera. Standard procedure, but it felt like justice somehow, having her lies documented by someone other than me. Dr. Haynes had gone very still. He stood by the window, his expensive suit rumpled now, his face the color of old newspaper. When Officer Rodriguez looked at him, he flinched. "Are you Dr. Lucas Haynes, urologist at Toledo General?" Officer Rodriguez's tone was carefully neutral. "I am." Dr. Haynes's voice came out barely above a whisper. "And do you know this woman?" He gestured to Emily, a pause, then defeated. "Yes." "How long have you been in a relationship with her?" Emily screamed. Actually screamed. "Don't answer that." "Lucas, don't say anything." But it was too late. The truth was already spilling out, unstoppable now that the dam had broken. 18 months. Dr. Haynes's shoulders slumped. "We met at a hospital fundraiser." I knew she was married. I knew I'd performed her husband's vasectomy. I knew it was wrong. David made us sound like he'd been punched. I wanted to go to him, hold him, tell him everything would be okay. But this had to play out. He had to hear it all. "And the pregnancy?" Officer Chen asked, taking notes. "It's mine." Dr. Haynes looked at David then, and I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. "The baby is mine." "I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry." David turned away, his whole body shaking. I couldn't tell if it was rage or grief or both. Officer Rodriguez was reading through the text messages now, his expression darkening. These texts reference using Mrs. Hamilton's money to fund a medical practice. Is that accurate? It was Emily's idea. Dr. Haynes was unraveling completely now, words tumbling out in desperate self-preservation. She said her mother-in-law would never notice. That the old woman was senile, that we could convince her to sign over the house. I am not senile. My voice cut through his babbling like ice. And I notice everything. Helen Scott had been silent through all of this, watching her daughter's destruction with the cold distance of someone protecting themselves. But now Andrew turned on her with sudden fury. "You knew." His face was purple, veins standing out on his forehead. "Helen, you knew our daughter was doing this." "I suspected." Helen's voice was clipped, defensive. "But I had no proof. And I certainly didn't encourage." "You did nothing." Andrew's roar made everyone jump. "You knew she was destroying this family, and you did nothing because you cared more about appearances than morality?" "Don't you dare." Helen started, but Officer Rodriguez interrupted. "Mr. and Mrs. Scott will need statements from you as well. If you had knowledge of fraud and failed to report it, that's potentially criminal." Helen went white. Actually white. For the first time since I'd known her, the perfect composure cracked completely. "I want a lawyer," she said coldly. "That's your right." Officer Rodriguez turned back to Emily and Dr. Haynes. "You're both going to need to come to the station. We have questions, many questions." Emily lunged toward David then, grabbing his arm with desperate hands. "David, please. Please, you have to understand. I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you." He pulled away from her like she was toxic, like her touch burned. Don't you dare say you love me." His voice broke on the last word and my heart shattered for him. "Ma'am, we need you to step back." Officer Chen gently but firmly separated Emily from David. She fought for a moment, then collapsed into harsh, ugly sobs. The next hour was a blur of statements and questions, and the systematic dismantling of lives. I sat at my kitchen table with Officer Chen, walking him through everything. When I'd found the test, what I'd heard, what I'd recorded, how I'd verified it all. "You did good work here, Mrs. Hamilton." Officer Chen's respect was genuine. Most people would have confronted them immediately. Got emotional. You stayed calm, gathered evidence. I taught English for 35 years. I managed a small smile. You learn to build a case before you make an accusation. Through the doorway, I could see David sitting alone in the living room. His head was in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent crying. That sight hurt more than anything Emily or Dr. Haynes had done. Eventually, the officers led Emily and Dr. Haynes out in handcuffs. Not arrested yet, they explained, but detained for questioning. The charges would come later: fraud, conspiracy, possibly extortion. Helen and Andrew left shortly after, Helen still demanding lawyers, Andrew looking like he'd aged 10 years in one evening. And then it was just David and me in the suddenly quiet house. I found him still in the living room, staring at nothing. I sat down beside him, didn't speak. Just sat there while the clock ticked and the house settled around us. "Mom." His voice was hoarse, wrecked. "How long have you known?" "Since I found the pregnancy test." 3 weeks ago. He nodded slowly. "Why didn't you tell me right away?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me without proof. Because you loved her. Because—" I took his hand gently. "Because sons shouldn't have to doubt their mothers just to believe their wives." I needed evidence that couldn't be denied. "She said she loved me." He laughed bitterly. "This morning, she said she loved me and I believed her." "I know, sweetheart." 6 years, Mom. 6 years of my life. I had a vasectomy for her. Gave up having kids for her, and she— He couldn't finish. We sat in silence. The house smelled like cold pot roast and carnations from the flower arrangement that had hidden my recorder. The scent of revelation. "What happens now?" David asked finally. "Now." I squeezed his hand. "Now we heal. We rebuild. We remember what truth feels like." He looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for bringing her into your life, into our home. Don't apologize for loving someone." I touched his cheek the way I had when he was small. "Apologize for staying once you know they're poison." "But you didn't know. How could you?" "You knew." I suspected, but I gave her chances. More than she deserved, probably, and I was right to suspect. David stood abruptly, walked to the window, looked out at the dark street. "I don't know who I am without her. Without this marriage. You're my son." I stood too, joined him at the window. "You're the boy who read every book I gave him. Who helped your father in the garden. Who grew into a good man despite everything. You're David Hamilton, and that's enough." He turned to me then, pulled me into a hug that felt like he was drowning, and I was the only solid thing left in the world. We stood like that for a long time, mother and son, the only family that mattered. Eventually, David pulled back, wiped his eyes. "I'm going to file for divorce. First thing Monday. Good. And I'm getting tested. Want to know for sure about the vasectomy. Even though—" His voice cracked. "Even though I already know the truth. Also good." He looked around the house, our house, with new eyes. "This place. I always thought Emily was right, that it was old, outdated, that you should move somewhere smaller. And now? Now I think it smells like home." His voice was soft, wondering. "Like it did when Dad was alive, before everything got complicated." I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time that night. "Yes, it does. We made tea, sat at the kitchen table where we'd had so many conversations over so many years. Didn't talk much, just existed together in the wreckage of truth." Around midnight, David's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then at me, his face going pale again. "It's from Emily's lawyer." He read the message, his jaw tightening. "She's claiming I abused her. That you manipulated the evidence. That this whole thing is—" He stopped, fury replacing grief in his eyes. I felt something cold settle in my chest. "She's going to fight. Let her fight." David's voice was harder than I'd ever heard it. "We have the truth." But as I watched him read through the legal threats, I wondered if truth would be enough, because Emily wasn't done. Even cornered, even caught, she was still dangerous. And the battle, I realized, had only just begun. Emily's threats lasted exactly 4 days. 4 days of lawyers sending aggressive letters, 4 days of her claiming abuse, manipulation, elder confusion, 4 days of her trying to rewrite history with lies even more desperate than the ones that started this. Then the prosecutor's office reviewed my evidence. The charges came down on a Tuesday morning. Fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, attempted extortion, for Emily and Dr. Haynes both. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Patricia Valdez who reminded me of my best students, called to tell me personally, "Mrs. Hamilton, your documentation was impeccable." Her voice carried professional admiration. "We rarely see civilian cases this well built. You'd have made an excellent investigator." "I was a teacher," I said simply. "We investigate lies for a living." She laughed at that. "Well, your investigation just ended 2 careers and possibly sent 2 people to prison. The medical board is reviewing Dr. Haynes's license, and Mrs. Hamilton, Emily, won't be able to practice those manipulation tactics from a jail cell." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with tea and let it sink in. It was over, really over. The lies had been burned away. The truth had won. But victory felt quieter than I'd expected. Emptier somehow. David had moved back into his old bedroom upstairs, the one he'd slept in as a boy, before marriage and vasectomies and betrayal. He worked from home now, couldn't face the office yet. Some mornings I'd hear him crying through the walls. Other mornings, nothing. Just silence that felt heavier than tears. We didn't talk much those first few weeks. What was there to say? His marriage was destroyed. His wife was facing criminal charges. His doctor, the man he'd trusted with his body, had betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. Some wounds don't heal with words, but slowly, quietly, we began to rebuild. It started with breakfast. Small things. David coming downstairs without being called, pouring his own coffee, making toast, sitting with me in the morning light that slanted through the kitchen window. "Remember when I was 8? He said one morning, his voice soft with memory. "And I tried to make you breakfast in bed for Mother's Day?" I smiled. "You set off the smoke alarm making scrambled eggs." Dad had to open all the windows. He laughed a little. The neighbors thought the house was burning down. The eggs were completely inedible. I sipped my tea, but I ate every bite. "I know." He looked at me then, really looked at me. "I know you did." Something passed between us, an understanding, a reconnection to who we'd been before Emily, before the lies, before everything got twisted. "Mom." David set down his coffee cup carefully. "Thank you. For saving me, for seeing what I couldn't see. You would have seen it eventually. Maybe. But by then, I'd have lost everything. The house, you, myself." His voice cracked slightly. "She was taking everything and I was letting her." "You loved her." Love makes us blind sometimes. It shouldn't make us stupid. The bitterness was still there underneath, still raw. I should have questioned the pregnancy immediately. Should have insisted on tests. Should have, could have, would have. I reached across the table, covered his hand with mine. Those are the words of someone looking backward. We need to look forward now. He nodded, squeezed my hand. Forward. Right, what does that even look like? Like this. I gestured around the kitchen, like morning coffee, like learning to trust yourself again, like remembering what home feels like. Home. He tested the word, rolled it around like something foreign. "It's funny. This house always felt like yours and Dad's. Emily kept saying we needed our own space, our own home. But now." He looked around with new eyes. "Now it feels like mine too, like it always should have." "It was always yours, sweetheart. You just forgot." We fell into a routine after that. David would work upstairs during the day. I'd cook, garden, read. In the evenings, we'd make dinner together. Simple meals, nothing fancy, nothing like the elaborate productions I'd made to impress Emily. Just soup and sandwiches, pasta with vegetables, roast chicken on Sundays, and we'd talk. Not about Emily or the trial or the betrayal, about other things. Books we were reading, Movies we'd seen, memories of Tom, of David's childhood, of the life we'd had before everything got complicated. One evening, about 6 weeks after that dinner party, David came down from his office smelling like sawdust. "What have you been doing?" I asked, surprised. He held up his hands, showed me the calluses forming. "Fixing things." The bathroom door that sticks, the loose board on the porch, that cabinet in my room that never quite closed right. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." He washed his hands at the sink, his back to me. "This house. It took care of us for so long. Dad built half of it with his own hands. It's time I took care of it too." My throat tightened with emotion. "He'd be proud of you." "Would he?" David turned, leaned against the counter. "I made such a mess of things. Married the wrong person, let her manipulate me, nearly lost everything Dad worked for. Your father made mistakes too, everyone does, but he always owned them, always tried to do better." I stirred the soup on the stove, chicken noodle again, David's favorite. "You're doing that now." That's all anyone can ask. The divorce papers came through in October. Emily didn't contest them. Couldn't really, given the circumstances. She was facing trial. Her parents had cut her off financially, horrified by the public scandal. Dr. Haynes had lost his medical license. The house of cards had collapsed completely. David signed the papers at the kitchen table, his hand steady. When he finished, he looked up at me with something like peace in his eyes. "It's really over." "Yes." I thought I'd feel different. Relieved maybe, or angry, but I just feel... He searched for the word. "Quiet, empty in a good way, like the noise is finally gone." "That's healing." I sat down across from him. "It sounds like silence because you're used to chaos." He nodded slowly. "The house smells different now." "Have you noticed?" "Different how?" "I don't know. Cleaner, lighter." He breathed in deeply. "Like something rotten was here and now it's gone." That's exactly what happened. That evening, David made dinner for the first time in years. Nothing elaborate, just grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. But he did it without being asked, humming while he worked. I sat at the table and watched my son move around the kitchen and felt something settle in my chest. Relief, yes, but more than that. Gratitude, hope. We ate together as the sun set, turning the kitchen golden. The scent of butter and bread and soup filled the space. Simple, honest smells that spoke of home and healing. "Mom," David said suddenly, setting down his spoon. "This smell. This feeling. I remember it now, from before Emily, from when Dad was alive. It's home," I finished softly. "Yeah." He smiled, and it was real. Genuine, the first real smile I'd seen from him in weeks. "It feels like home again." "That's because it is, sweetheart. It always was. We just had to clean out the poison to remember." We finished dinner in comfortable silence, washed the dishes together, moved through the familiar rhythms of the house like dancers who'd finally found their steps again. Later that night, I stood in my bedroom window and looked out over the neighborhood. The same houses, the same trees, the same streets I'd walked for 40 years, but everything felt different now, clearer, truer. My phone buzzed, a text from James Morrison. "Prosecution wants to use your recordings as evidence. You'll need to testify. Are you ready?" I looked around my room, at the bed I'd shared with Tom, at the nightstand where I'd hidden that first pregnancy test, at the life I'd built and nearly lost. I typed back, "I'm ready." Because that's the thing about truth. Once you've fought for it, once you've burned away all the lies to find it, you don't hide from it. You stand in it. You testify to it. You let it make you strong. Downstairs, I heard David moving around. Heard the soft sounds of him making tea, settling in to read. The sounds of someone learning to be comfortable in his own skin again. The house creaked and sighed around us, the way old houses do. Not the smell of decay Emily had complained about, but the scent of memory, of love, of generations who'd lived and struggled and survived within these walls. I breathed it in deeply. This was the smell of truth, the scent of justice earned, the fragrance of a home reclaimed. And it smelled, I realized with quiet satisfaction, like victory. Not the loud, triumphant kind, but the patient, persistent kind. The kind that comes from knowing you did the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. The kind that lasts. I went downstairs and found David in the living room, a book open on his lap. "Tea?" I offered. "Please." He looked up, smiled. "And Mom?" "Thank you for everything." "You already thanked me." "I know, but I'll probably thank you every day for the rest of my life because you saved it. My life, our home, everything that matters." I handed him his tea, sat down beside him. "We saved each other, sweetheart. That's what family does." We sat together in the lamplight, sipping tea, breathing in the quiet peace of a house that had survived its darkest moment and emerged clean. Outside, autumn leaves rustled in the wind. Inside, the scent of truth wrapped around us like a blessing. And for the first time in years, everything smelled exactly like home.